Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's sixth in the series of webinars on building resilient enterprises and through supply chain maturity and risk management. And we're really focusing on transforming from stage 1 through stage 5. So this is the fifth webinar, and we've covered quite a number of topics. There are six webinars, I should say, and we've covered all the stages in detail. So this webinar is really dedicated to case studies. We'll have some review at the beginning of the webinar, but we'll want to get your thoughts about where your company is and what you think, how these tools can help you understand your current maturity and how that can drive your capabilities and overall profitability, which is our main goal. So again, this is the last in the series of webinars. Our first webinar started with an introduction and identifying the wall using the Gartner Classic 5-stage model. Then we focused on moving from stage 1 to stage 2, then stage 2 to 3, into centralized and repeatable operations. Then we went into data decision making into stage 4, and then in stage 5, getting to that optimized ecosystem. And now today we're going to talk more about the overall roadmap again, review that, as well as give you some case studies, 3 case studies. So we're moving it up on that. Again, my name is Jim DeVries, and with us we have Greg Schlegel here, and we'll do our introductions in just a minute. But before we do that, we'll get into our deliverables today, building insights from stages 1 to 5, and overcoming the barriers to increase operational stability, which is often the most critical action that you can take, is how do you get that operational stability? And then what does that roadmap look like? We'll give you a roadmap at the beginning, and then we'll review it at the end through what our clients have done over the years here. And then again, we'll go through those 3 success stories. We'll bring one from stage 2, one from stage 3, and one from stage 4, and what they're doing and how they use the tools. And of course, then we'll review the financial payoffs of increasing maturity, providing you the ability to sell to your management on why you need to understand where you're at, how you're performing today before you can know where you're going. With that, Greg, an intro?
You bet. Thanks a lot. Pleasure to be here with you all again on our 6th webinar, covering this pretty large, comprehensive, holistic approach. I am the founder and CEO of a company called Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. We're 33 companies, about 1,700 folks, including Jim, who's a longtime member as well. We operate in 23 countries, and this is who we are and what we do if you're not familiar with us. We got 3 pillars on the right. We grew up in education, still do a lot of education through university work and with partners, online and so forth. We do a lot of consulting where we lead, guide, direct, and coach folks in their supply chain risk and resiliency journey. And then on the far right, we have a host of software as a service, cloud software companies who support our vision of what supply chain risk and resiliency is all about. On the left-hand side, we have a couple of product service areas, offerings, if you will. We have 2 certificate courses online, self-paced on an LMS. One is basically for manufacturers, if you make something, and the other is for service and public health care. Get a certificate as well, self-paced, doing quite well out there. Again, we coach, we consult, we lead, guide, direct, and coach folks on their journey. We have platform solutions to do the heavy lifting if you want to go global. And then we have 2 assessment tools, online assessment tools. We're going to talk about both today. One is the older one, the more mature one, is the online readiness assessment tool for supply chain management that we'll talk about, that essentially utilizes and profiles best-in-class process maturity, and we'll dig deeper into that. And the newer assessment tool is Pure Risk, Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency. We call it the 90-day action plan. It uses AI ML algorithms to automatically evaluate where you are on our maturity, 5-stage maturity curve, your company's risk appetite, and your company's culture, and based on where you are, who you are, and how you operate. The algorithms provide some actionable items to move the lever forward. So with that, I'll move it over to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And just a little background on the Enhanced International Group. We have over 80 companies in our group today. We're growing probably 5 to 10 a quarter. But what we focus on are finding exemplar companies that have been around for quite a while and provided service and solutions for companies, and with proven a track record of delivering self-sustaining solutions that have ROIs of 6 to 12 months. We do focus on creating SaaS solutions. We are working on building a SaaS solution around supply chain risk and resiliency with our partners. So that is just an example of what we're doing. We also do a lot in digitizing manufacturing to the point of activating Industry 5.0. So those are some of the things that we get into. With that, I want to just get us into the webinar and the bullwhip effect. Greg.
You bet. Thanks, Jim. I'll come back here. Hold on. Bear with me. There we go. Due to the tariff wars, folks, which we all are painfully aware of, we thought we'd just begin the session again and revisit what is called the bullwhip effect. It's coming around again. We've all lived through it during the pandemic. So we just thought we'd get you grounded on what is it, what does it look like? So from a definition point of view, you can see it. It's the effect of uncertainty caused by distorted information and material flow, or lack thereof, flowing upstream to the suppliers and downstream to the customers. So what does it look like? Let's look at the elements. On the demand side, on the top left, just go from left to right. Think of your customer. Anytime your customer increases the order size, decreases the order size, cancels the order, or exercises any additional risk event to you, as it goes upstream through the supply chain, the amplitude of that impact from a demand supply point of view can get pretty nasty. As you see, when you get to the supplier, it could turn into a nightmare for tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. Why? Because of all the tools, techniques, protocols, policies, and on and on and on. On the top right side, it can also happen from the supply side as well. Look at the box, go to the left, take a look at something like a foundry there on the left. If a foundry has a risk event, whatever it is, it can cascade downstream to the OEM, to the customer, and distort information and materials. So it can happen on both sides. What we did during the pandemic is we articulated the bullwhip effect and called it the W-like recovery. So the net is, if you're still in business and you still have a business via the pandemic, you are resilient. Just a little thread, all right? But it's coming around again. Why? Because of the order and supply going to zero, essentially because of the tariff uncertainty. So essentially, why do we say that? Because here in the US, we know that the West Coast ports are almost empty. All right. There's no activity. People are being laid off. All right. It's back. The bullwhip effect is back. We profile what the impact of the bullwhip effect can be on different disciplines within a supply chain over a 12-month period. You're looking at the bottom there. Blue is retailer, red is a wholesaler, green is a distributor, and orange is a manufacturer. The reason we show this is it displays what we call supply chain latency, when demand and supply are out of balance. So if whatever you did during the pandemic, you are still in business, get ready to essentially maybe exercise those techniques again. But we wanted to start with the bullwhip is back. With that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Yeah. So just to be clear, so everybody know, no matter what goes on tomorrow with the tariffs on, off, there's no way to prevent this. This is going to happen. And because we've already cut off bringing things over, and manufacturing has already been cut and the warehouses are empty. So just to be clear, we will have this bullwhip effect over the next 3 months. And as demand increases in the fall, as it always does, there's not going to be enough supply. So hold on, be ready. And this really relates to our webinar, in that you need to understand where you're at today to understand what you should be doing in order to prepare for this bullwhip effect that will be occurring. If you haven't felt it yet, you will be feeling it. So we're going to talk about the 5-stage model, overcoming the barriers, navigating that. We'll talk about a case study, a first case study, which is a CPG company that's fairly immature to a chemical company that is at mid-maturity level, let's say, and a fairly mature company that's on the heavy industry side. We'll look at those 3 different case studies, and then we'll look at, again, the metrics. And the metrics are, again, dependent on what stage you are. Different metrics are going to affect you differently, depending on how mature you are. That's why it's so important that you understand where you're at, so you understand which metrics you should be focused on in order to recover quickly, as quickly as possible, or faster than your nearest competitor throughout. So that's really the whole driver of this webinar and why we focused on that. So overcoming the barriers. So we reflect on the Gartner model here. Again, the y-axis is looking at your mindset. Are you internally driven, inside out, or are you outside in? Meaning you look at the customer, which is a much more mature way of looking at your business. But if you're just like, I just got to do left to right stuff, I'm at stage 1. Typically a brand new company, a startup company, or a fairly immature company that's maybe in an uncompetitive market, possibly. The focus is on growth, scalability, but profitability is not really that important for you. So what happens in most of these companies is we'll outgrow our sins. So no matter how unprofitable we are, we're just going to grow like crazy. And so we'll mask what is actually happening. So if you're in that stage, understand that that's the stage you're in. The second stage is business units, where you've broken up. You've said, okay, these are our business units. You're still inside out. You're somewhat more organized. Stage 3 is where you're actually focused on a standardized output. You're looking at adapting. You're starting to build an ecosystem. You're starting to build central operations that actually work. You might have tried it in stage 2, but you're not. Your mindset is still inside out. So if you haven't moved from inside out to outside in, and you're stuck and you don't want to go to outside in, you're going to push yourself back to stage 2 and maybe even to stage 1, and you'll do what we call the 1, 2, 3 step. That's not the 1, 2, 3 step you want to be doing as a company. It's very expensive. And generally it's a turnover of management in that, especially the upper levels. So with that, as we have our maturity model, we talk about Ring of Fire apprentices. Those are how we assess. So if take our free assessment, it takes about 15, 20 minutes to take. you come out and you ring of fire, then you know you're there. So it's a free assessment. You can learn where you're at, whether you're ring of fire, apprenticed, mainstream, or an exemplar. If you're an exemplar on there, then the next question is, from a supply chain management perspective, what can you do more to make your company more resilient? And that's where you look at value equals profit. And then the supply chain risk and resiliency activities really come to bear to really help you get to that point where you can look at predictability, you can be looking at resiliency and sustainability for your company. So it's pretty exciting if you think about it. You can really transform your company up through here and by understanding where you're at. So this is a complicated chart. Again, this is off of Gartner's slide. So we try to simplify it a bit and say, okay, what's the roadmap to exemplarship? And we have the 5 stages laid out. And then we've laid in on top of that our readiness assessment. And you can see from stage 3 on is an exemplar on our supply chain management readiness. So if you're there already, if you're an exemplar and you take ours, you might say, well, what's next? Well, what's next is supply chain risk and resiliency. And you can move through those stages to become more and more mature. And we'll actually be getting into trust, how trust can accelerate. The question is, what can accelerate this whole process? And Greg will talk about trust next on how trust comes to bear, especially when you're moving up in this ranking. But before we get to that, we have, in light of the tariffs, what actions are you taking to ensure your supply chain is more resilient? So in the upper right-hand corner, you can take your cell phone, log in there, enter in some of your thoughts. It looks like some folks have already done it. What actions are you taking to make your supply chain more resilient? Greg, your thoughts?
You bet. I like the idea of supply chain visibility that, as you will see when we talk about our 5-stage maturity model in supply chain risk and resiliency, supply chain visibility we think is very important. It's actually stage 2, right after education and awareness. So we always talk about, what you don't know about your supply chain, upstream and downstream, can and will hurt you. So great to see the supply chain visibility thread.
Yeah, and just to be clear, you can keep entering stuff in, enter it in the chat if you like. Any thoughts that you have on what actions you're taking to get your company ready for these the bullwhip effect? What are you doing out there? So we'll come back to that at the end of the webinar. So please keep entering in. With that, we thought we'd look at it from uh, another perspective, looking at it from the cost impact, margin impact, and growth impact. And what's the mindset? If you're at stage 1, you're probably in firefighting mode, where if you're a firefighter, those are the people get rewarded. The bigger the fire, the more rewards. So you have some good firefighters. So hopefully they're going to be on board and they're going to say, hold on, I wonder if we'll survive, right? So those companies survive based on their firefighting capabilities. If the stage 2 is, I call it the hope stage, I hope we'll get better. I hope we'll survive. You're in those silos, but each silo, the key here is because you are in a silo environment for your companies to, or your divisions to start working together. That's the quickest thing you can do right away. The third stage is you're stabilized, and this is where you can really start leveraging each other and maybe look at different ways of managing the processes that you had not. Work with your customers, your suppliers. This is where you can probably, in stage 1 and 2, you probably haven't built trust with your customers and suppliers. Stage 3, you've built that trust, so now you can leverage them to help you survive and thrive through this bullwhip effect. Stage 4, hey, you've already got the great ecosystem, you're building it, everybody's on board, you're going to have very little cost impact, and you'll be able to ride this storm. If you're stage 5 and you're scaling your company, that means you're in control. So you're looking for stage one companies to buy and gobble up, so to speak. So depending on where you're at, will depend on, what your mindset is and what strategic action you can take uh, to weather these tariffs. So with that, I will turn it over to Greg and he'll walk you through a roadmap aligned
Yeah,
to.
we thought we'd finish up this section again just to get you grounded with kind of a roadmap as we see it to a part or responding to the theme of financial gain through increased maturity. So from left to right, you know, we constantly talk about assess your organization's capabilities. Jim mentioned it. You can do that with our free supply chain assessment tool. It's got all the best practices over 35 years in supply chain, and that gives you a nice little chart, and we'll show you details in a minute. Once you do that, you can also compare yourself to your competition using some of our benchmarking techniques within the supply chain assessment. That normally gets a lot of action when you actually position a company within against its own peers. So from a process maturity point of view. Then we talk about aligning your organization to a common vision. Once you know where you are and where you are positioned, that normally gets everyone excited. And then you start to try to get alignment in terms of moving the lever forward. Uh, After that, you got to agree on where you want to go, and that's a vision. And that we help with that vision in terms of supply chain risk and resiliency and the coaching and so forth. After that, as you move forward on the roadmap, then we always advocate to prioritize your strengths, improve your weaknesses, and leverage your strengths. Now that you know them, now you know where you are, how good you are, and how to improve. And then finally, that roadmap leads to, from our point of view, a positive financial impact. And we advocate all the time balanced scorecard, BCS, in terms of doing inside out and outside in capabilities. So pretty good roadmap. We just wanted to share that with you as we go into our next section. That next section is stage 2, maturity journey. That Jim's going to talk about supply chain management process maturity. So I will turn it over to him.
Thanks, Greg. And we can all relate to this. Maybe you've been at one time in a room like this. So this is generally a stage 2 company. That's the right reason we showed this picture. And if that's what you see or that's what you have, that's what you have. So with that, we're taking a CPG company that called us up one day and asked us how we doing. Again, we have the familiar supply chain management readiness radar screen here on the left-hand side, broken up into 3 areas. Just at a high level, where is this company at? So you can quickly see they're an apprentice at 7.15. So they're here. They're from a strategic, tactical, operational perspective. We always look at those three perspectives. Their focus, meaning that's where they need to work on, is on the operational side. And in this particular case, they are laggards. So I think that's why they called us, because that somebody told them you're a laggard. You need to get on the stick, so to speak. So this was very good for them and helped them. So it says, where do they need to focus? It says at the operational level, but let's first look through the tenants quickly. You've got the leadership, bound scored card, and intentional redundancies. I'm sorry. So you can see they're hanging there. Bound scorecard seems to be the worst area that for them in that particular area and the strategic perspective. And here you can see information systems and industry at the operational level for them are the 2 that they areas. It seems like they're doing some risk mitigation planning, which is good to see. And then from operational perspective, it looks like logistics is the area where they need some help, and their best area is S&OP, but they're not so adaptive. So very quickly, snap your fingers, and of course, the power of this is when you have 4 or 5 people in your organization performing this analysis, and one group says it's this and one says it's something else, and that's where the rich dialogue comes in on with your team, your cross-functional team, finance, sales, marketing, logistics. All these different groups are then represented, and then you get that rich dialogue so that you can put together your plan. But let's see what happens when we benchmark them. So again, just a review of benchmarking, we break up industry benchmark as our laggards, average followers, and leaders. And you can see, we break it up by 25 percentiles, so pieces of the pie. So 1/4 of the folks are at the bottom, and 1/4 of the folks are at the top. And so we break it down there. The key indicator here is the median. That's the midpoint. That's where the middle is. And you want to say, where are you performing relative to that midpoint? And are you in the first quartile, second quartile, third quartile? So basic stats, non-peer metrics. So the real question is, since we have hundreds of assessments, we can easily benchmark. So this is what we did with this company. So with them, we looked at it, and we just show you this overall. We've shown it before. The Ring of Fire, apprentices, that's our overall classes or our groups of performers. And then from a industry benchmark perspective, we're broken down to leaders, followers, average, and laggards. And so you have the CPG, logistics, healthcare, NGOs. So just depending on what company you are or what industry you are, you can now compare yourself. So in this particular case, the CPG use case, like we said, they're down here. So if you want to have a graph to send to your management that says we got to do something, this might get them motivated to do something. So what did these guys do? Well, what we recommended them to do is gain leadership support to drive enterprise-wide supply chain and supply chain risk and resiliency visibility. So creating supply chain, a single language in the organization, get it up and running at a much more mature level than what they're at today. They may be speaking different languages. Focus more on supply chain management best practices to enable and deploy supply chain risk and resiliency. So we believe that if you can't speak supply chain management, you can't go into supply chain risk and resiliency. So that's the first thing that needs to be done. Make sure that everybody's speaking the same language so that when you move to supply chain risk and resiliency best practices, they are known by everybody. Then map your end-to-end supply chain. Most likely they're at early stage 2, maybe in the Gartner model. So they're probably 4-wall type mindset. They don't really look at upstream and downstream of their company. So map that out. Understand where you're at. Create intentional redundancies throughout the supply chain. So where do we need an extra supplier? How are we going to be more robust? How are we doing those risk mitigation activities and protect against the VUCA world that we know is coming because of, in this case, it was because of COVID, but it's the same story, of course, with the tariffs as we just discussed. And then link the balanced scorecard, which they show that they need some work on, get that balanced scorecard up and running, and identify maybe a couple, no more than 3, but probably 2 key risk indicators that can be driven from the top down. And so that was our recommendation to them. And this was a response. The supply chain readiness tool was very thorough and truly an end-to-end holistic assessment. As you can see there with their comment, they had not looked at end-to-end really the way we define it here. And as it says, the scope was wider than I initially anticipated. So that's a use case of a company at stage 2. With that, Greg?
You bet. Thanks, Jim. That was kind of a one of our three use cases that focuses on supply chain process maturity levels. All right. And now what we're going to do is talk about another case study, more or less in and around the Gartner area of stage three. And it's going to cover both tools. All right. And so we thought we'd start with this. This is something new for us. All right. This is what we call the trust molecule. All right, we're old chemical manufacturers and process chemical operations folks, so we thought we would talk about trust going forward in a chemical reaction type of slant. Now, this incorporates our supply chain management readiness assessment, which you see on the right-hand side of the molecule. It incorporates our supply chain risk and resiliency assessment, which we're going to talk about in a moment. That's outside in, and supply chain management readiness is inside out. And then it also includes on the top what we call our balanced scorecard. We call these three dimensions of a resilient enterprise. And then what we thought is we'd inject trust into the discussion and built out a trust molecule. So think of it as kind of a chemical reaction, a kind of a catalyst. This is our thoughts. It's cause and effect relationships. We think trust is a catalyst to impact these three areas, inside out, outside in, and both, as a resilient enterprise. And think of this molecule and trust as a water balloon. If you've ever played with water balloons, what happens when you squeeze a water balloon? It goes all over the place. All right. It's not linear. And that's why we put together trust with our three approaches in terms of a chemical reaction. So we have a 12-month project for the Department of Defense to talk about trust and data transparency within all supply chains. So this is the impetus of putting together the trust molecule. The analysis is going to go real deep into systems thinking, which we talked about. We're going to be doing sentiment analysis. We're going to be doing statistical analyses as well. We're going to inject some theory of constraints in this project. But the net for you all is we're going to end up with probably an online free supply chain relationship trust matrix where you can go in and start building up a couple of different relationships and then get kind of a heat map profile in terms of how good and how solid that relationship is. So we just wanted to tee that up. We're going to be talking about the trust molecule in the next series of webinars. And so we wanted to just tee that up and now move into a use case that profiles both tools. All right. This is a chemical company. Jim just explained the charts. On the left-hand side, you get the outcome of going through the questions of discovery. This particular chemical company is what we call an emerging leader on the top right. They came in at 4.29 out of 10. One thing to remember, the closer you are to the center in terms of your as is, all right, the more mature your supply chain processes are and the less risk you have. So this company, we did the STO, the strategic, tactical, and operational analysis. They basically are strongest in operational at 3.5. Remember, the lower the number of the tenants, the stronger the tenant. The focus area we came up with was you could be much better at strategic elements of leadership, balanced scorecard, and intentional redundancy. So this is a leader. This comes out of supply chain readiness assessment. All right. Then Again, the biggest opportunity was essentially in strategic tenants. And so as Jim profiled as well, we benchmarked this company. Again, he explained the benchmark. There is petrochemicals as an industry, and I believe this organization came in pretty high on the petrochemical maturity list as a leader. So this normally gets this chart gets executives' attention, because what we're saying to them is, based on hundreds of industry peers, you are here. How do you feel about that? And we go through a long dissertation, but it's how do you feel about being in one quartile, two, three, or four? And that normally gets executives' attention to begin to act. There's more. In this particular SCM readiness assessment, we call it Tier 3. This is how we address improvements. What we do is we take the 13 tenets and we ask different types of questions. We ask questions associated with importance. Now you know where you are, all right? And now, how important are these tenets to you? And remember, we're going across multiple disciplines: demand planners, VPs of supply chain, procurement folks. We ask collectively, how important are these tenets? And we get a graph that you see in the middle. Then we also ask a second question about, well, how satisfied are you with the performance of these processes? And then we turn that into dissatisfaction, add them together, and come up with maybe a top 5 list on the left in terms of focus areas to improve the supply chain process maturity. It gets a lot of discussion, very, very critical and very impactful as well. Moving on, within this tool set is the action plan. At the end of the day, when you go through the analysis, we'll do a little recap here. This company is, from a benchmark point of view, remember, from a supply chain process maturity point of view, they are an emerging leader. The greatest opportunity is strategic, and as an industry, they are one of the leaders. And so what does the tool give them? A couple of action plans from the algorithms. What are they doing today? This is an active client with us. They're focusing more on supply chain agility and resiliency because they're a bit bureaucratic. They're developing new metrics in terms of supply chain risk and resilience than ever before. They're attempting to reduce their rigidity in terms of government structure, and they're attempting to realize and understanding their risk appetite relative to their vast product portfolio. So quick comment on the bottom here. The chemical VP more or less said, the readiness is a critical success factor in our industry. That's true. Before the assessment, they felt they had a pretty good, robust supply chain approach. The tool was a terrific wake-up call for our supply chain team. So all good there, and they continue to move on. All right. Now that is SCM Readiness Assessment Tool. Now we're going to talk about our secondary tool, assessment tool, which is supply chain risk and resiliency. It's kind of a journey, but now it's talking more about how your company perceives risk and handles risk. We call it prescriptive 90-day action plan. You can go take a look at some videos on our website if you're inclined. It's 90 days. We try to keep it short and sweet. It requires about maybe 7 hours of time per executive over a 3-month period. We have virtual onboarding, collaboration, and coaching sessions as well. And so that's what you give. What do you get? You get charts. All right. The algorithms go through and capture the answers to the questions. Left to right, it tells you, where are you today on our 5-stage model. And we'll go through this company's picture image, but there's the 5-stage model. It tells you who you are in terms of your risk appetite. How do you perceive risk in your company? There's only 4 perspectives. The third chart is how do you operate, which is really your company culture. We affectionately call it what's the shape of your kite. And then based on where you are, who you are, and how you operate, you get a 90-day action plan. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The process is down on the bottom. We like to ask for a designated lead. Once we have the lead, then we ask for 5 to 8 stakeholders, executives across multiple disciplines, and it takes 25-30 minutes to answer the question by executive. And then what we do is we produce a 90-day action plan report with like 5 to 8 actions, a heck of a lot of insights from our database and from our experience. It's kind of a McKinsey-like report. It's maybe 35-40 pages. And then we do checkpoint calls. First call is normally, do you have it? What do you think about it? You need any, do you have any questions of clarity? And we move on. After about 30 days, we go, okay, what'd you do? Did anything work? Do you have any problems? That's a checkpoint. After 60 days, we try to get another pulse check. And then ultimately after 90 days, if in fact they've moved forward with the action items, we talk about what can we do next to drive value for you. That's the process. Let's take a look at this chemical company in terms of how they answered the questions of discovery. On the left-hand side, you have the maturity model, 5-stage. They came in at the beginning of stage 2, which is visibility. You can see the red icon. That's where they said they are today. Stage 2 out of 5. We asked them also in the online assessment, where would you like to be over the next 12, 15 months? And the black icon indicates that they'd like to get through the visibility and become more mature in terms of all the questions of discovery and methodologies in terms of visibility. So they're in visibility today. Then who are they? How do they perceive and handle risk? They came in as what we call pragmatists and conservators. We've gone through the picture image of the 4 perspectives over the last 5 webinars. We'll talk a little bit more about them, but there's only 4 perspectives. There's no right or wrong answer, folks. They seem to come in at pragmatists and conservators. They touch pragmatists and they touch conservator and a little bit of manager. So no right or wrong answer. We'll talk a little bit more about their feedback in a moment. On the right-hand side, we have what's your culture? How do you operate? All right, and you can take a look at the kite, but the longest pole in this kite, it's not totally obvious, but the longest pole is they're pretty slow and pretty bureaucratic. All right, that's all good. No right or wrong answer. So based on where they are, who they are, and how they operate, we move to the next profile. And this is what they said to us. This is their user feedback from the 90-day report. On the maturity model, yep, that's where we are. We're fine with that. We've started the dialogue. All right, we're beginning in visibility. We're a global company. We're all over the globe. All right, they're big ERP. They manufacture product, and we're not looking past the visibility stage because they have a vast product portfolio. On the risk appetite, they didn't push back. Yes, we are pragmatists and conservatives, meaning we're kind of risk averse in making decisions. We don't really like risk, but we handle it. We're committed to make progress. That's good. They were having a change in leadership. Still, they didn't expect that their risk profile would change. They are pretty reactionary. They told us this. We wait till the last minute as a pragmatist, keep all options open, and then we firefight, as Jim mentioned before. We're very good at executing and firefighting and knocking down the risk. On the operational propensity, yep, we're pretty bureaucratic. We're slow to make a change. Our data is siloed. Some of our folks are still siloed. We're slow to solve major issues. We do a lot of firefighting. When we have a problem, we marshal the troops, and then we really we're pretty good at reactionary. We're not so good at being proactive when it comes to risk. So what did we tell them? What did the tool tell them to do? Here's the recap. They're invisibility, they're pragmatists and conservators, and they're pretty bureaucratic. So it gave them about 7 action items. And the action items come out of the algorithms in terms of developing a probability of success. All right. We don't try to give them too much. We try to give them just enough to get a couple of wins and move the lever forward. So they're looking at end to end. They're going to map their supply chain. They talked about identifying key suppliers. They've done this using the Altman Z-score. They used Dun & Bradstreet and a few others to predict financial health. They got a sponsor. They have a director of supply chain risk and resiliency. That's good. They understand how to assess risks, because not all risks are the same. They're trying to transfer some of their manual risk methodologies into automated workflow. That's great. And then the tool also said you might want to think about, as you move forward, maybe getting an external risk alert solution, because you're so global, and it might speed up your identification, assessment, and mitigation. All right, so that is pretty much the action items that came out of the company using both tools at, as Jim said, at a certain stage, stage 3 in the Gartner arena. So with that, we'll move into our third caselet, if you will, talking about another maturity journal and actually our journey, and talking about supply chain risk and resiliency tools. So I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. So this company is a heavy industry company. And just as a quick review of the maturity model, the 5 stages you see outlined there: foundational, visibility, sense and respond, risk management, and sustainable. So the question, of course, is, where are you today? Where do you want to be? So we just threw these slides in here as a reference for you. Again, our overall goal is to identify, assess, mitigate, and manage risks. That's what we're trying to get to, and move from high risk through medium risk to low risk through these 5 stages. So with that, the other tool that Greg referenced is the risk appetite tool. And on the y-axis, you have risk averse versus risk opportunity. So if you're above the 50%, you look at risk as an opportunity. And if you're below, you're going to be more risk averse. On the x-axis, you have everything from tactics from doing nothing to loss control to risk steering to diversifying to risk acceptance. Again, having your a cross-functional team identify, are you a pragmatist, conservator, manager, or a maximizer, and how you manage risk in your company. There's no right or wrong, as Greg said. We just wanted to throw these slides in here just so you have a review of these tools and to reference as you look at these. For this particular case, in this heavy industry, we had, in this case, in the heavy industry, they were very similar to what Greg just covered with the chemical. No, not really surprising that a chemical industry and heavy industry probably handle risk in a similar manner, just because just operating a heavy industry, manufacturing, they're big equipment, big stuff. So there's a lot of risk all the time, just like a chemical industry where you're managing risk. So not too surprising that they were very similar in as a prag conserve type of environment. And then the kite, again, Greg went over the kite. And in this particular, that we always ask, what is the shape of your kite? What is the longest pole in the kite? The longest pole in the kite is always at the bottom when it graphs through our analysis tool. And so, which has the longest tail? If it's a box kite or is a one tail kite or a two tail kite, how does it look? What is the shape of your kite? Again, there's no right or wrong. This is uh, your culture, your company, and how you manage your culture, and we call it operational propensity, as it's shown there. Again, no right or wrong here. So for this particular case, for this heavy industry, just moving our way in here, uh, they were it was interesting because they said, "Oh, we are here." They are a little bit more advanced than the chemical industry, fairly mature in supply chain management. But they're pretty adventuresome in that they said, "Oh, we're here, but we want to get there." And we go, "Well, we love the energy, but we have to slow down." They already had risk management activities going on in the company when we met them, and they wanted to know what can they do more in risk management. So again, they've been focused on it for the last 2 years. They're a global company, again, 150 companies with a single SAP instance, and they're looking to achieve sustainability as soon as they can. So this is a few years ago. And that was driven mainly when you look at risk appetite, they have a new CEO. So the CEO doesn't like that they're a prag conserve. They're actually saying, how can we look at risk as something to manage versus how they do it today? So when we met them, that new CEO was much more aggressive and they want to be less risk averse, as it says here. And they're reactionary. They were reactionary, and there's a strong urgency to change this approach. So again, very interesting that they recognize where they were at here, and most companies say we're at where we're at, but this CEO says no, we're going to change. And then they said, okay, yeah, we're very bureaucratic, very similar to what Greg just said, but this company said, we want to be more agile. So they want to change the shape of their kite and they want to change the way that their risk appetite. So a little bit different situation. It's all about leadership and what they want to do. In this particular company, they wanted to identify all the possible risks. That's what we suggested them to do. Map the supply chain manually and digitally. They had done a couple uh, tiers upstream, I think, but they really hadn't done it in detail. So that was another thing that they wanted to focus on. They want to spend more time on the key suppliers in, like what Greg said, in the Altman Z, and use other tools, automated tools. There's a number of automated tools to assess supplier health and customer health. And they've incorporated those very, very quickly. It was basically a snap of the fingers. I think by the time we were done, they had already incorporated a lot of these things. And so they were beginning to identify and prioritize risk, value to risk, and time to recovery and time to impact. They were really focused on this, and very good leader there, supply chain risk. They had a supply chain risk leader in place, and they were building a supply chain risk alert system. They were purchasing one as we were very early stages right away, and they wanted to build and test a digital twin. So in this particular case, these guys were moving really, really fast and adopting things. So it'd be interesting to see how well that they did to get to sustainability very quickly. With that, I'll turn it back over to Greg on some testimonials on the tools.
Yeah,
Greg?
yep, you bet. We thought we would just inject a couple of testimonials on the tools. As you can see, we have over 400 active users. we've actually had over 4,000 users over a 10-year period utilize the tool. The assessment tool has gone through several upgrades like we talk about today. It's on a learning management system. It's on a platform. It's all online real time. But a couple of pretty interesting testimonials. We talked about the consumer packaged goods. That's fine. I wanted to talk about aerospace. I think it's in the middle. Jim, there you go. I thought this was pretty interesting. After spending a lot of time as a DoD plant manager, this one was pretty interesting. Your assessment tool was the most complete supply chain management assessment method I've seen to date, and I've been in the business for 40 years. This was an aerospace and defense executive. And then we talked about the chemical arena. There's one more on the bottom. We do a lot of work with healthcare folks, with NGOs. We've worked with over 25 NGOs and donors. We utilize these tools to improve their supply chain performance, mitigate the risk, and save lives in contested countries. And I thought this was pretty good. Comprehensive program. The persona are very aligned to our organization. Definitely a tool I would recommend to other staff members in our supply chain arena. And that was an NGO executive of a big NGO company. So we just wanted to share those with you. We'll move on. Again, Jim put the question in terms of resiliency. I'm not sure if we've had any additional ones, Jim, but all good.
All good. We can move on.
Yep.
Feel free to reach out to us at any time. We'd love to get your feedback on what you're doing.
Yep. All right. One more thread. We'll close it out with the profit pathway. And I think we'll turn it over to Jim. I think he's got a few threads, and so do I.
So this is a slide we show at every webinar almost. So you've seen this slide quite often. Again, what we really want you to take out on is, depending on where you're at, will depend on which one of these KPIs is most relevant for you. And these are just some benchmarks from Gartner and Chainalytics and different companies on the benefits that you'll get. I'd say minimum benefits you'll get from maturing through the Gartner 5-stage model, or through any maturity in supply chain management and supply chain risk and resiliency. So these are pretty heady improvements that your management should be looking at. And when you're going into this tariff and into the bullwhip effect, you can be sure that anything that you've gained by squeezing on from a pure cost out perspective is at risk now of being lost very quickly. So if you're purely looking at cost out as a way to drive through the pandemic, or through the tariffs, I should say, you probably are not going to survive. You're going to have to look at how do you maximize margin and profitability. If you can open up and move out of the bottom half of the Gartner model to the top from an outside in view, if you can just do a few things from that perspective, it can open up so many opportunities to bring margin into the company that you would have not ever thought. And the key to that is collaboration and communication. So with that, I will turn it over to Greg.
Yeah, those are some statistics in terms of what we've seen, and what we recommend in terms of supply chain management process improvement, the maturity side of supply chain. These are benefits we've seen over the 15 years that we've been in this space, in terms of what you can achieve when you get into risk and resiliency in a big way. So let's just look real quick. Cost reduction. If you have a robust risk and resiliency program, we have seen clients have their insurance premiums reduced 10% or more because they aren't as risky to their insurance company. Also, the exemplars automate their flow. We talked about recommending automating the risk and resiliency workflow so that you have a repeatable quality process. The second one is cost avoidance. What does that mean? Well, that means you're getting more effective in terms of identifying, assessing, and mitigating risk faster than your nearest competitor, anywhere from 17 to 20% faster. And in risk management, speed is life because time is money. So if you do cost reduction and you do cost avoidance within an SCR&R program, you're going to improve working capital. You're going to make a friend with the chief financial officer. All right. Why? Because that officer is going to be able to make a better cash flow forecasting with a minimum error, essentially, especially if you're a publicly held company. CFOs do not like surprises when they have to sit every quarter on the with the analysts. All right. So cost reduction, cost avoidance, you're going to improve working capital, you're going to free up cash. There's another way to do that, and that is what we advocate in terms of cash conversion cycle. You may or may not be using it. If you're not, go to Wikipedia, find the calculation and do it and understand it and exercise it. It's a methodology to improve your supply chain performance and also mitigate your risk. All right. It's called cash conversion reduction or cash conversion cycle. If you improve that cash conversion cycle anywhere from 10 to 20%, you're going to free up more cash and make impacts. And then Altman Z-score, we talked about it. What is it? It's a bankruptcy predictor with 95% forecast accuracy, 12 to 15 months into the future. Why wouldn't you leverage that? Now, granted, your D&B, your credit company that you use, yes, they use Altman Z-score. They will not tell you they use it because it's free. It's on Wikipedia. It's 40 years old. You can do it yourself. All you need is an income statement and balance sheet, and you can calculate the Altman Z-score for any customer and any supplier because we think time is money. And if you have to swap out a key supplier, it's going to take you 6 to 9 months and at least $1 million US to change out a key supplier. So our mantra is think big, start small, act fast. I'll turn it over to Jim.
So with that, just as a recap of what we kicked it off with, I'll just focus on the right-hand column here. The strategic actions you can take depending on where you're at, on what stage you are. The Gartner model for stage 1, continuity planning, very easy to do. There's a host of folks that can do that. We can do that, but do some continuity planning if you have not done that. That's like table stakes, so to speak. Diversify your supply base. If you're at stage 1, it may be too early to do that. You may have problems doing that. It may be a struggle. But if you're at stage 2, that's something you definitely can do. Stage 3, get invest into some technology and analytics. You'll get your return on investment, believe me, if you invest the correct way. We have a host of offerings where all of our partners guarantee a 6 to 12 months ROI. If your provider doesn't guarantee that with 100% certainty, then you know that they're not worthy. Stage 4, build a trust matrix. That's where you really understand your data up and down your supply chain, enhance your supply chain transparency so that you understand what's going on and try to get that as close to real time as possible. And in today's world, there's no reason why it can't be real time. We have that technology. That's very doable. And then leverage trust for strategic growth. This is really leveraging your knowledge throughout. So those are 5 things you can do aligned to the 5 stages. With that, we'll just close it out with The roadmap again, assess your organization's capability, compare yourself to the competition, align it to a common vision, agree where you want to go, and prioritize strengths and opportunities, and link opportunities to financial impact. If you're not doing anything, start doing this tomorrow, because you can't lose if you do these steps right here. With that, again, thank you everyone for helping us through these 6 webinars, and these deliverables. Hopefully you found the webinar beneficial. Please do drop us a line anytime and ask us questions. And with that, Greg is going to share with you a little bit about our next series coming out in the next couple of months on trust. Greg?
Yep, you bet. We just want to put together our next series, which will be all around this trust. We'll begin to share findings from our 12-month project, such as what supply chain data professionals share with each other, what they don't share, and why don't they share. All right, because we know that according to Steve Covey and research we've been doing in this project, that when folks share data within a supply chain, costs are reduced and activities are accelerated. To us, that means top line growth, bottom line growth, market share growth. All right, so we're going to share with you as much as we can every webinar. It's kind of very exciting for us, and we hope to see you in July. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim. Thanks.
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us on this webinar and this entire webinar series. And again, with that, I turn it back over to Greg for his closing remarks, and then I'll close it out. Go ahead,
Yep.
Greg.
Well, again, we're very excited about this 12-month project. We think it plays well with our series that we've shared with you in terms of the Gartner and how we support the Gartner Stage 5 model. And trust seems to be the catalyst. In our opinion, trust will be the catalyst for supply chain and risk management performance excellence going over the next 3 to 5 years because of the volatility in the marketplace globally. So stay with us. Look for our July webinar series, and should be very, very interesting. So thanks again for hanging out with us.
Yeah. Again, thank you for joining us today. And as Greg said, trust is where we're going in our next series. We appreciate your feedback on this series. There will be a survey sent to you by Zoom. If you can answer that survey, telling us what we can do better for next series, that would be wonderful. And we really appreciate your feedback, your fortitude of joining us throughout these series. And as Greg said, trust is where we're going to be spending all our time on. And we truly believe that if you don't have trust, you're not going to be able to be relevant in the world. And as the world gets smaller and smaller, we need to trust our neighbors more and more. So think about it that way. The world is getting smaller, so we'll need more trust in order to move things faster. With that, we'll sign off, and all the best to everyone. Thank you so much.
Cheers.